slow, letting go. September.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Abby Clements. I'm one of the co-founders of Teachers Unify to End Gun Violence. Sarah Lerner is also one of our co-founders, and we are very proud to host tonight's presentation of Trust Talk for Teens and to introduce to you Kristin Song.
Thank you, Abby. My name is Kristin Song, and I just wanted to share with you my story and why I got involved in lobbying for Ethan's Law and also to promote the lesson plans that Robin has created that partner with the legislation. I just wanted to read to you something I just kind of wrote out today, just kind of taking you through the day that my son was killed. It was just an ordinary morning. I ran around in desperate search for the elusive baseball pants I knew I saw but couldn't find, peppered my boys with questions as they loaded up their backpacks, and added to the never-ending to-do list that was posted predominantly on my refrigerator. Perhaps you can relate. That morning, my son Ethan got his braces off, and after he was freed, we sat in the car and I took a photo of him and texted it to my husband. Look, no braces. It was just another milestone. That would be the last photo of Ethan alive. We went out for a celebratory breakfast. What struck me at breakfast was how confident and excited he was about his future. He shared with me all of his hopes and dreams. He wanted to attend Rice University, join the Army, marry, and have 7 children. He was no longer a child, but a smart, confident, compassionate young man who I knew would make a difference in this world. January 31st, 2018 was actually a beautiful winter day. The temps were mild, the sun shone bright, and the sky was a deep blue. I remember thinking as we left the restaurant that it was a miracle that all 3 of my children were in good places. All of them were happy. And for a moment, I thought maybe I was a good mom. When we returned home, his best friend stopped over and Ethan asked if they could walk to his friend's house. I hesitated because it was already 2 p.m. and we were having an early dinner. I told him to be back by 4:30. I heard the boys laughing while they walked out my front door. An hour later, I heard an ambulance scream past my street. I had no idea my son was taking his last breaths. Minutes later, I saw 2 officers walking across my lawn, and my heart sank. They wouldn't make eye contact with me. They just kept telling me Ethan was hurt and I needed to get to Yale. I texted my husband, 911. When my husband and I ran into the emergency room, it was like the parting of the Red Sea. You see, they were waiting for the dead child's parents. I took off running towards the bays where I knew my son would be, but I was stopped by a social worker who grabbed me by the shoulders and led me to a tiny room where no sunlight ever reaches and where no good news is ever delivered. The ER doctor entered the room, slid down the wall, buried his head in his hands, and whispered, "Your son is gone." And at that moment, all that I knew, loved, and trusted imploded. I fell to the ground and started rocking in a fetal position, begging to see my son. I wanted to tell him how loved and cherished he was. I wanted to kiss his forehead. I wanted to tuck him in one last time. The ER doctor took his head out of his hands and said, "Please remember your son as he was. He's unrecognizable, even to your eyes. He was shot in the head." But the ER doctor didn't understand. I was the first person to welcome Ethan into this world, and I wanted to be the last to say goodbye. I never did get to say goodbye. As I walked out of the hospital into the starless night, my son was being wheeled to the morgue. It was the first day of my life sentence and the first day of his death sentence. 10 months later, the day before our first Thanksgiving without Ethan, the prosecutor informed us that the negligent gun owner, the adult who brought 3 lethal weapons into the home and failed to properly secure them, would suffer 0 consequences, not even a fine. In the eyes of the law, my child meant nothing. The prosecutor told us in order to hold a negligent gun owner accountable, the law needs to change, and so we did. Ethan's Law was passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in Connecticut. It requires gun owners to store their weapons if minors can gain access. The day Governor Lamont signed Ethan's Law into law, I turned to my husband and said, "Now on to Washington." Unsecured guns are responsible for the majority of gun deaths in our children. Suicides, unintentional shootings, and 76% of all school shooters use an unsecured gun from home or a relative's home to hunt and kill innocent children. And the largest source of stolen guns are from private homes. these stolen guns flow into the Black and brown communities and kill their children. My goal is to create a cultural shift in this country where it becomes second nature to secure your weapons if children can gain access. I believe child access prevention and safe storage laws will have the most dramatic impact on reducing gun deaths in our children. But as you know, legislation alone is not enough. Education is imperative in creating that cultural shift, and that is why Robin has created a comprehensive lesson plan addressing this issue. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you.
Thank you so much, Kristin. Just your advocacy and your strength and your story. And now I feel like I see Ethan's face when I think about self-storage, safe storage, and everything that you work toward. And I think what we can do as teachers and educators in terms of empowering students when they are faced with scary and dangerous situations, or even if they think it's funny, but like something in the back of their mind is telling them that this might be dangerous. I really think that these lessons can make a difference. They will make a difference. It's just a matter of time. So thank you again, Kristin. And tell us about these lessons, Robin.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Fox. I am a social emotional learning educator. I was a public school teacher for 37 years. And in the past 10 years, I've been doing social emotional work in schools using improv. I'm a professional improv actor, using improv exercises, mindfulness techniques, and cognitive awareness, thinking about your thinking. And these lessons are a direct result of knowing the impact of experiencing directly and practicing what to do in situations that might arise, because unless our children have these techniques, these awarenesses already planted in them, they'll have a difficult time accessing immediate solutions when they're in a dangerous situation, or they know that there's something dangerous is around them. So I'd like to share a little bit of the guide with you all. It's called Just Talk for Teens. And we actually I'm sorry, I'm just gonna play from the start. Okay, and it's about non-defensive communication and responsible decision-making. There we go. And we start out with pre and post tests that are done electronically. They are sent to both the teacher, so they have a record of what the students learned before and after, and they're also sent to Song Strong and Socialize. So we will have an awareness of what the kids are learning and how they are growing. It starts out with the pretest, as I said, because we want to know, as a teacher, we want to know what are we measuring? What's the baseline of information that they have now? And the questions we ask are very basic. I recognize when others are communicating in a defensive manner. I know how my brain works and how it affects my decisions, the basic functionings. I know how to neutralize my statements. I understand how to recognize when I'm overwhelmed and how to get help. I understand Eason's law and can communicate its components. There's a number of other questions on here. That's just a sample, but we wanted to get a baseline so that we can measure our kids' learning from these lessons. And I'm going to go through sample lessons from the 4 different categories. We start out with ice-breaking activities. From my experience, and I know from my childhood, that I was in the same school system from kindergarten through 12th grade. There was a boy in my class when I was a senior who I never have spoken to. I never had a conversation with him. I knew very little about that boy in the back of the class. And there's plenty of kids who are alienated and disenfranchised, and they do not feel like they belong. So one of the things that we wanted to do with this guide is to start out with having kids connect. Because in order to talk about situations, in order to talk about polarizing ideas, we need to give the kids the skills to do that. And to do that, they need to be able to communicate with each other, feel safe enough to communicate, and know how to do productive group work. So from there, we go to communication, building social awareness, self-awareness, empathy, and improving their ability to collaborate while speaking to others and listening on purpose to each other. That leads to the brain science. We just do very simple brain science. We introduce the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and say how that affects their thinking and their actions. And we play a few games that I'll get into about that. Then we get into the secure storage and responsible decision-making activities, which is we want to get there, but you can't leap over all the other things and expect kids to carry through with these very high stakes responsible decision-making. So we wanted them to have experiences collectively so that they are encouraged to communicate about dangerous situations. Abraham Lincoln famously said, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." And one of the reasons why, how easy it is to dehumanize other people, how easy it is to objectify other people, is because we don't know about them. If you watch the Olympics or any major sports and they do that sidebar where they go into the struggle that person had to get to be a gymnast or to get to be a football player, their trials, their tribulations, their obstacles that they had to overcome, the courage that they got, the people who surrounded them, your heart is now connected to that person. And when you see them competing, you're rooting for them. And one of the things that we don't promote in our schools is that connection in a very systemized and successful way. So we wanted to start out with exercises. And here's just an example of one of the few exercises in the guide. Alice Walker said, "The most common way people give up power is thinking they don't have any." So we start out with a fun exercise, which is superpowers. And we have the teachers play this too, but everybody picks a superpower. And these are just suggestions that are kind of fun. You can fix anything. You can always be right. You can have healing powers or mind reading or oracle or fly or time travel. And so this is fun to pick a superpower, but then we get into a little bit more depth and we say, what is it? Why did you choose it? What will you do with this new superpower? Which will reveal what you value. So in this low stakes activity where it's fun to choose a superpower, we quickly get into the real essence behind what people value. We get to know each other a little better. And then we talk about what superpowers they might already have, which are our strengths. Those are our superpowers. And then what obstacles do you need to overcome? Because superheroes always have obstacles. Heroes always have obstacles. Human beings, by their very nature and definition of being alive, are faced with obstacles all the time. So what's an obstacle that's getting in the way of something you really want? We want them to exercise that idea of we're stretching, always stretching to grow, always stretching into a zone of discomfort to get to the next level of understanding and learning. And what steps you can take to overcome it. And then we get into the difficult conversations, the non-defensive communication. And non-defensive communication is necessary when stakes are high, emotions are strong, opinions vary. And that's the essence of every board meeting or political thing that you go to right now. Those things are true, but they're also true on every polarizing topic. So this is the work of a few people that Sharon Strand Ellison is one who wrote the book Taking the War Out of Our Words. And she did a lot of, she actually helped me with this. I contacted her and said, "I love your work. I'm doing this thing about gun safety and storage for high school kids." And she said, "I want to help you," which was really wonderful. So we need to make sure that we have clear intentions. We have physical signaling, meaning that our bodies are open and receptive to learning. We have to be curious. Instead of saying, why do you think that? We need to learn to say, what made you come to that conclusion? Which is a curious statement. We need to seek understanding, because unless we do that, we'll never know why somebody chooses to own a gun or to do something that we might not do. And when we do that, when we seek understanding, goes back to the values. We find out what somebody values in their appreciation for something that we might not value. And usually it comes down to the same core things, that we want to overcome fear and keep our family safe, keep our kids safe. We just go about it in different directions. But then once we agree that we have this common interest of keeping our children safe, we can then go on to, well, let's work together to do that. What would make sense, rather than polarizing onto, I'm in this camp and you're in that camp, and we are on opposite sides of the lake. And then respecting the differences. So we want to teach kids to ask non-defensive questions so that they are communicating instead of just talking at people. So do you really want to know? Are you asking clarifying questions? Is your tone of voice relaxed, firm but not harsh? And your body and facial expressions, are they relaxed and confident? Because you have nothing to lose by finding out what somebody else believes in. Because that does not mean that you can't believe what you already believe. And we need to teach our children that it's okay to have different beliefs than people. Everybody doesn't have to be on your team. We can respect differences. And we need to let others know how to respond without trying to control their choices. Again, neutral tone, relaxed body language. And this is a part of Sharon's wonderful work that works in so many different situations, where we tell someone two sides of a prediction. If you keep doing that behavior, this is what's going to happen. If you change that behavior, this positive thing can happen. So if you keep shouting, I'm going to leave. If you stop shouting, I'm going to stay because I really want to hear what you have to say. Giving people options helps them shape their behavior, and it can de-escalate a situation that is getting out of control. So we want kids to practice this so it becomes part of their skill set. David Brinkley said, everyone's entitled to my opinion, which is how most people operate in the world. But kids need to know the difference between fact and opinion, so they're not hanging on to opinions thinking they're facts. Even today, one of my students said, rain is depressing, because it was raining today in Connecticut. And they said, oh, rain is depressing. Everybody hates rain. And I said, I actually like a rainy day. So I don't like rain. Is that fact or opinion? Rain is depressing, fact or opinion? We need to have them be clear about what is a fact and what's an opinion. Otherwise, they are going to build a house of cards on an opinion. And that house of cards is going to fall down, and it's going to devastate them if they don't know the difference. And it also is, for our mental health, we need to tell the difference. So what happens when we state opinions as facts? Sorry, that was an open-ended question. And it's usually that people get defensive because they don't agree with that, your opinion. But the fact is the fact. And that is what we can agree on. That it is raining. We can agree on that. How it makes us feel, that's your opinion. And there's so many conversation pitfalls that we all fall into. This is not just for students, by the way. I've learned a lot by studying this, and I have changed the way that I communicate, which is a wonderful thing, because that means that the adults who teach this will also have that advantage. Sorry, not sorry, which are statements like, oh, I'm sorry you were offended by that, or I'm sorry you feel insecure, or I'm sorry you took it that way. These apologies evade responsibility for what has been said by you. And then there's blame and shame. Blame and shame, these statements place blame on someone else, starting a defensive struggle. I only said that because of what you said. You're the one who made me feel this way. I told my teacher off because you said I should express myself. So blame and shame are other ways of avoiding responsibility. And then the last one is sarcasm. And when I realized what sarcasm really did, I stopped using it. So a while back, I said, I'm never going to be sarcastic again, because what sarcasm really is irony under the cover of humor, but it's really conveying contempt. It sends a message that you would rather make another person feel inferior for their opinions, perspectives, or actions, rather than confront the actual issues. Well, this is a great waste of time. Or this is a great use of time, sarcastically. Oh yeah, you always know what's best for everybody else. Or I'm sure you do. So this stops communication and builds defensiveness, which is not how we're going to get our children, our students, to be able to talk through hard subjects. So what we like to do is teach them how to manage their emotions. This is just a very simple technique that we have in the guide that teaches that as soon as something feels off, they need to stop. They need to not react, but to take a breath and drop their awareness into their body. What that does is it moves their awareness from their reactive brain into their executive functioning brain, which allows them to have access to their whole thinking capacity. Because when we're just in our reactive brain, 75% of the rest of our brain is cut off from our access when we are reactive. And you know it, every time you've gotten angry and flipped your lid and lost control, you say things you didn't mean. Why do we say things that we don't mean? Because we're not thinking it through. We're not staying in that part of our brain that helps us realize that we can stay regulated and react and not let other people determine how we're going to be in this world. So then we can respond with intention. And we have a little video that we show them. I'll just show a little bit of it. And this is an exercise that they do.
Did you know you could train your brain to be happier?
What if you can learn to be less anxious and more confident?
Well, imagine no more. That's why we're here.
First, we'll show you a disturbing scene without using the slow breath practice. Saban, you left the kitchen a total mess after you made macaroni and cheese. I don't have time to clean up after you. I have company coming over now.
Oh, I had it with you. You told me to do my homework after lunch, right? I can't do everything.
Don't you talk to me like that. Go to your room. Wow, that was unfortunate. We're going to do it again. This time, Saban will use the slow breath practice. Saban, you left the kitchen a total mess. I have company coming over. I don't have time to clean up after you every time.
I am so sorry, really. I thought you wanted me to do my homework after lunch. I'll clean up now.
Okay, but remember, first clean up, then homework, okay?
Okay.
Why don't you practice using the slow breath in your groups? Have player 1 be upset with player 2 for any reason you decide. Then have player 2 react without using the slow breath practice. Then do this short scene again, but this time have player 2 use slow breath as soon as he senses that player 1 is upset. See if you can tell the difference.
The whole idea is to have kids experience things like this so that they're practicing doing this. If you tell somebody something, they know it. If they experience it, it becomes part of their cellular biology and they can recall it, they can remember it, they can practice it. And then it's incumbent upon the teacher to say, let's use our slow breath practice, let's stop and drop, so that they are learning to not be reactive, because it's that reactivity that leads so many of them and so many humans into trouble. So then we teach the brain science. Who's driving the bus? So basically we teach the simple functions of the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And the amygdala is that almond-shaped organ in the center of our brain that is the reactive part. And the prefrontal cortex is the thoughtful part that can access the other parts of the brain and make good decisions and think about past things and think about future consequences. And we have an exercise that we do, which is one of my favorite exercises in the guide, where one student acts as a provocateur, saying something like, let's jump off the cliff at the quarry. The other student now becomes the one whose brain is trying to figure this out. So two other students are behind the student trying to figure it out. One plays their amygdala, one plays their prefrontal cortex. And students act out scenes after brainstorming in small groups, responses from the amygdala versus the prefrontal cortex for a bunch of situations. The first one is that, this is the practice one that they do with the whole group, which is, let's jump off the cliff at the quarry. Wow, that sounds interesting. And then, so this is scripted and they just follow the script. Let's hear from Ella's brain. And the amygdala says, hey, jump, it's what she wants you to do. You're her best friend, right? And the cortex is going to past memory saying, well, that looks dangerous. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. And didn't somebody get really hurt or die when they jumped off the cliff before? And then we have them go through a couple of different situations. So we want them to do in situations that might be happening to teenagers that are, not horrible situations, but situations that are risky. We want them to see how their brain is reacting. So I have a bunch of different scenarios that they brainstorm in small groups, and then they come back and share with the class what's the amygdala reaction and what's the prefrontal cortex reaction, hoping that, Kristin shared with me early on that Ethan knew right from wrong. He knew dangerous things, but it was that part of his brain that was just going with the, group. He was afraid of not being included, or he might have been afraid of not being included. And she said, please have some brain science in this. So I coordinated this with a professor from Trinity College, and we came up with the simple functions of the brain and how they affect teenagers. And we have a little quiz for teenagers so they could learn a little bit more about when their brain is fully mature and when they'd be inclined to do risky behaviors. Then we get into Ethan's Law, and they do a research project where they have to go on the computer and research when it started. I know that every state doesn't have Ethan's Law, and it might not be that name, right, Kristin? It might be another name, but it's a safe storage law. But we wanted to start with the beginning, so we wanted them to go and research the law in Connecticut, and have them come up with the understanding of why we have laws. What is that all about even? And what is the purpose for us following laws? And the whole idea that they are now seeing that these things can protect us and they make sense. Then we put them in a bunch of different scenarios where they have to do critical thinking with difficult situations. So this is the responsible decision making. They have to consider multiple perspectives and solutions to problems and to identify trusted adults. So they go through a bunch of scenarios where one is when Ethan's friend is, and Ethan's at his friend's playing with the guns, and the little brother's watching, and they have to answer some questions about what would they do. They have threats on social media. They see someone saying, you think I'm a baby? Wait till I come to school tomorrow. I'm gonna make babies out of all of you when I come. And he has a rifle behind him. Two kids have a gun in a backpack. And two kids walking to school, one has a gun in the backpack. And she's like, oh, it's my uncle's gun. It's cool, right? And they don't know what to do with it. So, there's another kid threatening online. So we want them to both understand what to do when they detect these threats online in their social groups, and also when they go to a friend's house and there's a gun there. How do they react? What should they do? And we want them to do this in a way where they are brainstorming together, coming up with multiple scenarios of solutions, and then presenting it to the rest of the class. Again, we want them to experience this so that if it happens in real life, they're better equipped to make good decisions around what to do. The last lesson is called Project Your Message, and we want them to do a project to share their knowledge. We all know that learning, the culmination of learning is when you can teach something well. And so we want them each to take a piece of this and be able to share it. And we teach them how to know their audience. It's very, very scaffolded. So it's simple steps. They have to fill in this and then fill in that and choose from here and choose from there, so that they're not just staring at a blank piece of paper saying, I have to do a project. So we really help them with each step. So they can choose all different ways of doing that. And that's the last lesson, so that they are now transferring everything they've learned in the 9 lessons to communicating out to the greater community somehow. How are you going to share this? Is it to the middle school, the elementary school? And how would you do it for those audiences? Are you doing an event, a community, presenting at a community group, writing a song, a poster, a PowerPoint, a video, or PSA? And by the way, we got rights from someone Kristin knows at Disney to show a PSA as an example of from, what's the name of that show, Kristin? Something Mac, right?
It's Andy Mack. It was a show on a while ago.
And they did a PSA about gun safety, which is awesome. And they gave us the rights to include it in the guide, which is really cool. So the kids can see a professionally produced PSA so that they have examples for these things. So that's pretty much the guide. And thank you all for listening. I know I took a long time to share it, but again, this is really important stuff that we need to get out into the world. And I think, you know, we're recording this in the hopes that more people will see it and contact us. So I'll give it back to you, Abby.
Thank you so much, Robin. I really wish, I don't work with high schoolers, but I would love to see some of those lessons in action. I think that would be, I think kids need this more than ever right now, not just because of guns, but because of with social media and like lack of communication skills. There's so many reasons why these lessons are important.